Mightyreacts, back with the reacts. Today we are reacting to top bins, football players you won't believe exist. Enough with the talking, let's react.
Did you know that there was a goalkeeper who was too short to play football, but still became one of the greatest of his time? This is Jorge Campos, and despite standing at only 5 foot 6 inches tall, he became so good that FIFA had to change the rules of the sport just to stop him. And he's only one of the 10 most unbelievable players I have to show you. Like the goalkeeper who played pro despite going blind, the plane crash survivor who won the Ballon d'Or, and even the certified cripple who became a football legend. But first, this goalkeeper was born with a disability that should have destroyed his hopes of ever going pro. Being a goalkeeper requires complete focus, but what if your mind is telling you something else? Like you need to pick up a random rock, and no matter how much you try to ignore it, your heart would start pounding and you would find it hard to breathe. That's how goalkeeper Tim Howard felt growing up, because he has Tourette's syndrome, which causes tics, facial jerks, and a sensation that you have to perform certain random acts, which is a disability that almost guaranteed he wouldn't make it as a football player. And to make things worse, Howard was also diagnosed OCD, giving him a double whammy that threatened to derail his football career before it ever got started. Howard said that on the pitch, his mind would order him around and tell him to touch the goalpost or adjust his gloves, but somehow when the ball came close to him, everything else would blur away, leaving just the ball in focus. With all this going against him, his mom tried to get some help from his school, but they didn't believe that he had a medical disorder, no matter how much evidence his mom showed them. But everything changed when the doctor who treated Howard told him that sometimes kids with these disorders have special gifts. So Howard would spend hours practicing and imagining he was Pele, using his hyper-focus to improve his skills until one day the US national team identified him as a potential future star and placed him in their Olympic development program. Against all odds, Howard would then get his big...
Hey, shout out to him, bro. That's why in life you just gotta keep pushing. Sometimes no matter what you have or you're going through, you gotta keep pushing and focus on your thing that you want to focus to and succeed in it. Yay.
Break at Manchester United, but an error in the last minute of the Champions League against Mourinho's Porto smashed Howard's confidence, and he was eventually sold to Everton, where he would make more than 400 appearances and become a club legend nicknamed the Secretary of Defense, as well as becoming the undisputed US national team #1, producing a man-of-the-match performance against England in the 2010 World Cup, and then going one better in 2014 against Belgium when he broke the record for most saves in a World Cup match.
Nice, bro.
His heroics led him to be inducted into the US Soccer's Hall of Fame in 2024, and now he uses his success to raise awareness for Tourette's syndrome and inspire others, proving that really anything is possible. But whilst Tim Howard struggled with these disabilities, Edgar Davids faced a much greater challenge as he was going blind. When Edgar Davids started his footballing career, he looked like this, but it wouldn't be long before he has to play football looking like this instead. But what happened? The Dutch midfielder was born in Suriname and moved to Europe to start his career in Amsterdam, where he was rejected twice by Dutch giants Ajax until they finally gave him a shot, and he repaid them by helping them win the Eredivisie 3 times, as well as the greatest prize in European football, the Champions League. But in that same year, Davids suffered a head injury that a few years later would not only threaten his career, but also his entire livelihood. Davids moved to Italy, where he would play for AC Milan and Juventus, but his eyesight was suffering as he was diagnosed with glaucoma, a degenerative condition where the optic nerve is damaged, causing dimmed vision. The ferocious tackler, known as the Pit Bull, had a tendency to see red on the football pitch, but without an operation, he wouldn't have been able to see at all. After he got the operation in 1999, Davids was worried that he might have to retire, but he found that he could wear special goggles that would allow him to carry on his footballing dream. The only problem was he needed to get
that's why he was wearing all the time the goggles,
and to take the eye drops that he needed, but luckily FIFA allowed it. He also said his goggles would steam up while playing, and it took him a long time to get used to them. And with his new look, some players even made fun of Davids for wearing goggles, including Dutch defender Jaap Stam, who said, "We're playing football, you haven't got time to go skiing." And needless to say, Davids saw red. In fact, he picked up 25 red cards throughout his career, as he so often lost his temper. But still, this was a great career, having played for Barcelona, where where he was credited with helping their resurgence as a European force, as well as Inter Milan, until a career low move Spurs, until finally returning to his boyhood club Ajax. Despite his struggles dealing with this disability, his iconic appearance would end up playing into his star power as he made the cover of Nike adverts and the FIFA video games, making him one of the best-known footballers of his generation. But whilst Davids had it tough, this next player had it so much worse, as he was only born with one arm. Meet Alex Sanchez, the Spanish footballer who was born with only one hand, but despite the obvious challenges he would face, he didn't let that affect him. While he started playing just for fun, it soon became apparent that he could go further, and at age 15, he got a call from a local club, Real Zaragoza, which changed his life. But he says the step up to professional football was tough, and he soon realized that not everyone wanted him to succeed, and that football is the most individual of team sports. He said it felt like he was taking an exam every day, but he impressed for the reserve team, scoring some 12 goals in 10 games when Zaragoza head coach Marcelino called him up for the senior side, where in a match against Valencia, he got his chance, being brought on as a substitute for the final 16 minutes, making him the first footballer to play in La Liga with only one hand. But it wasn't a dream debut, as he got a yellow card for diving, and then, after the match, realized he had to deal with the media pressure from his newfound fame, saying some sensationalist media didn't treat the facts as they should have done, and that, aged only 20, he had to listen, watch, and read some unpleasant points of view. After 3 appearances for Zaragoza, he left the club and played in Spain's lower leagues, including a spell at Osasuna, as well as moving to Australia to play for Sydney Olympic, where he scored 34 goals in 44 games. But his career seemed to be petering out before he made a late, bold move, aged 34, to head to India to play for Gokulam Kerala, where he was the I-League's top scorer in the 23-24 season with 19 goals, meaning that despite playing with only one hand, he had conquered both the Australian and the Indian First Divisions, proving that anything is possible. And Sebastian Haller has gone on to prove that in an even greater way, because just after a dream move to Borussia Dortmund, he was diagnosed with cancer, which could have and probably should have killed him.
I remember
but before I get into that, we have to discuss the shortest goalkeeper in football who outscored most strikers, and the crippled Brazilian who lost his virginity to a goat. But first, all I ask is that you subscribe to the channel. It's free, and you can always unsubscribe later if you change your mind. Thank you, and now on to Haller, whose life was shattered just days after the biggest move of his career, as he was diagnosed with a cancer that put his life into a terrifying uncertainty. The French striker started his career at the French club Auxerre and struggled for the first few seasons until a loan to Utrecht in the Netherlands unlocked his goal-scoring potential, and after 51 goals in...
And yes, he's now playing back at Utrecht, so shout out to Haller, amazing player.
98 games, he earned a move to the Bundesliga and Eintracht Frankfurt, where in his first season, he won the DFB Pokal German Cup, and in his next season, he had the second highest goal contributions in the league, behind Bayern Munich's Robert Lewandowski, which led to Haller being signed by West Ham United for a then club record fee. But things didn't go well for Haller after West Ham changed their manager, and he found himself on the fringes of the team. So he left for Ajax for a club record fee, where he became the top scorer in the Eredivisie in 2021-2022 and scored 11 goals in the Champions League, earning him a move to Bundesliga giants Borussia Dortmund, where he was finally ready to compete for the biggest trophies. But just 12 days later, he was forced to withdraw from the team's preseason training camp. He'd complained that he felt unwell during training with the Côte d'Ivoire national team in May, where he started having pain in his belly, but he thought it was just a stomach ache, so he took some pills and tried to play on. But after a few days, it got worse, and he couldn't even finish training. And then a few weeks later, he felt unwell again, so he had medical tests, including an MRI scan, where it was discovered that he had a testicular tumor. He said he realized something really serious is happening. He had testicular cancer and needed treatment right away, having 2 surgeries and 4 rounds of chemotherapy, leading to hair loss, nausea, and pains in the stomach. And while he posted pictures of himself at hospital on social media, he said it was difficult for him to reassure his kids who could see him changing from the chemo. But the team and the wider football world gave Haller their full support, and after a long and hard fought-out treatment, he was finally cleared to return to football, where he played his first game for Dortmund in a winter friendly, and then 3 days later scored his first goals for the club with a hat-trick in just 8 minutes in a friendly against Basel. He then went on to score 9 goals in the second half of that season, and then in 2023 would score the winning goal in the African Cup of Nations semi-final, as he helped his nation Côte d'Ivoire win Africa's biggest football tournament on home soil, meaning this cancer patient became a national hero after he was able to get back to full fitness. But
guys, what will y'all do if guys, what will guys, shit, man, Guys, what would you do if everything in your life is going great, you're doing well in your sport and your career, and then something happened that you need to take a time back and recover, or whatever the case is? What would you do? Would you give up or keep pushing? Let me know in the comment.
Some players are never deemed fully fit. In fact, this football player was always told he was too big for football and he would never make it pro, as he became the heaviest football player of all time. You see, some people are built for football and some just aren't. But that didn't stop this next footballer from trying to live his dream. Meet Adebayo Akinfenwa, a striker who weighs over 100 kilograms and can bench press twice that weight. But despite his massive frame, he struggled to make it in professional football in his hometown of London, so instead he took a bold move and left for Lithuania, which is hardly the football hotspot. He made an instant impact by scoring the winning goal in the Lithuanian Cup final, but not everything was rosy, as Akinfenwa suffered severe racism from the fans, and after a few years he headed back home but couldn't find a club in England, so he joined Welsh side Berrytown, where he won the Welsh Premier League. But just as things were going well, a financial crisis meant Berrytown had to sack their entire squad, so Akinfenwa finally joined a team in England. But impressing sides in England is no easy task, even when your nickname is The Beast. And Akinfenwa went from Boston United to Leyton Orient to Rushden and Diamonds to Doncaster Rovers, all in 5 months, before finally settling at Torquay United, where he would score 14 league goals and was the fans' player of the season. But Torquay were still relegated, so he moved to Swansea, where he scored on his debut and won the Football League trophy, but broke his leg in his second season and was soon on the move again that summer. It looked like he was joining Swindon Town until he failed a medical, as he was deemed too large and now had to spend the next 6 months searching for a new football club. He then...
Bruh, imagine being that big, bruh. Nobody can take the ball from me, bro. I will surely hit everybody, bruh. Move out the way, bruh.
Spent a few seasons bouncing between Northampton Town and Gillingham before joining Wimbledon, where he would score against the team he supported as a kid, Liverpool, in the FA Cup. By now, he was getting interest from clubs as far away as Major League Soccer, but he was still let go at the end of the season, so he went on Sky Sports News to plead to any coaches to send him a WhatsApp message and give him a job, and Wycombe Wanderers did just that, and finally the giant journeyman had a permanent home where he stayed for more than 200 games and scored 52 goals. And after seasons in England's third and fourth tiers, he would finally win promotion and play in the Championship before retiring from professional football, proving that no matter his size, he was still good enough to make it pro. But whilst Akinfenwa was just too large to play football, this goalkeeper nearly died on the pitch and was told he could never play football again unless he wore a crash helmet on the pitch. Petr Cech was a very talented goalkeeper growing up, 6'5", a monster in the net, and the future of Chelsea's goalpost. He was being discussed as the best goalkeeper in the league, as he was breaking clean sheet records left and right. But at the start of his third season at Stamford Bridge, everything would change. In the first minute of a match against Reading, Cech caught the ball but was smashed into by Reading's Stephen Hunt, whose knee collided with Cech's head. He rushed to hospital and replaced by Carlo Cudicini, who also suffered a head injury during the same game. However, while Cudicini only had a mild concussion, Cech's condition worsened and he required emergency surgery. They had to insert 2 metal plates into his skull just to survive, and there were fears he would never play again, with Chelsea head coach Jose Mourinho saying that Cech was lucky to be alive. Petr had lost all memory of the day of the game, but when it comes to recovering from injuries, Cech's mental strength is unparalleled, having recovered from a severe leg break as a kid and having played the previous season with a broken shoulder. But even so, a head injury that nearly cost Cech his life is something that should have sent Cech into retirement. But Cech said, "The first thing I do when I get injured as a professional athlete is to say to the doctor, don't tell me what I can't do, tell me what I can do." And just 3 months after his life-threatening injury, he was back on the pitch for Chelsea for a match against...
Bro, shout out to him. Just 3 months after. Whoa. He was recovered fast, man.
Against Liverpool, although he looked a bit different as he was wearing a protective helmet. The idea behind this helmet was that if he ever were to have such a collision again, it would act as a shock absorber, but still, it was a risk. So, against all doctors' advice, Cech was back on the pitch diving at players' feet, and shortly after his comeback, he kept 8 clean sheets in a row, and Cech kept breaking records and smashing expectations with 3 more Premier League Golden Glove awards, and was named Europe's best goalkeeper in 2007 and 2008 before a move to Arsenal, to play another 4 seasons, and if that wasn't enough, once he retired from football, he switched sports to become an ice hockey goalkeeper, and somehow throughout all of this, he never faced a collision like he did all those years ago, meaning he managed to carry out the rest of his life in a healthy way. But unfortunately, Gordon Banks did not have the same luck, as this goalkeeper went blind, but somehow was still able to carry on playing football professionally.
How?
Now, we have to roll the clock back for this one, because Gordon Banks had a tough childhood in post-war England, leaving school at 15 to fill banks of coal, which helped him build up a stronger upper body, and when an amateur team's goalkeeper didn't turn up for a match,
bro, back in the days, it was harder than now, bro. Some players had to work and train to go professional. Yeah, now too, but anyways.
the team's coach spotted Banks among the supporters and asked him to go in goal, where he played until he was spotted by Chesterfield, who gave him a chance with their reserve team, until eventually he broke into the first team and moved to Leicester City, who paid him £15 a week. His form at Leicester meant he eventually broke into the England national team, where he went to the 1966 World Cup and didn't concede a goal until the semi-finals, setting a record of 721 minutes without conceding a goal for England, which was only broken by Jordan Pickford in 2021. But even though Banks conceded 2 goals in the final, England won the World Cup, and Banks became a national hero. Although Leicester had other thoughts, saying his best days were behind him and sold him to Stoke City, but Banks would continue playing for England. But worse was to come for Banks when 2 years later, he was driving his car when he attempted to overtake on a tight bend and crashed his car in a ditch, causing glass to smash into his face and eye. Banks needed 200 stitches and was told he could lose his eye, as glass had gotten inside the socket of his right eye, and in the end, his sight in his right eye never returned, severely limiting his goalkeeping abilities and forcing him to retire. But that wasn't quite the end for the Banks of England, as 4 years later he somehow returned to football, or shall we say soccer, as he crossed the Atlantic to play as a named superstar in the North American Soccer League against other football legends such as Pele, George Best, and Franz Beckenbauer. And despite being blind in one eye, he showed he still knew how to keep the ball out of the net, as he played for Fort Lauderdale Strikers, who won the Atlantic Conference in 1977 and only conceded 29 goals in 26 games, making that the best defensive record for the season, leading Banks to be named NASL Goalkeeper of the Year and NASL All-Star, before finally retiring a year later at the age of 40.
No matter what, no matter the conversations, bro, no matter the situation, bro, you gotta keep going, gotta keep pushing. And yeah, if you cannot, yeah, you cannot, bro. No matter the situation, you gotta keep pushing, bro. Got to. This is motivation to all the people who are going through something and you think because of the situation you cannot do it. Bro, just keep pushing and go do it.
Meaning a half-blind goalkeeper was named the best in the entire division. But Banks wasn't the only England star from that era to come back from impossible odds. In fact, his teammate did something even greater, as he was one of the only survivors in a plane crash, and only a couple years later was named the best football player in the entire world. This is Bobby Charlton, a man who was born to a coal mining family in the northeast of England, but was spotted as a teenager by Manchester United, who were building a talented collection of young footballers known as the Busby Babes. And Charlton's talents stood out straight away, as he scored 2 goals on his debut as Manchester United won the league and qualified for Europe, but were knocked out by Real Madrid. The next season, they went again, beating out Red Star Belgrade in the quarterfinals in a dramatic 5-4 win, and this year, Man United were the clear favorites. But on the way back from that match, disaster would strike. Manchester United's flight from Belgrade had to stop at Munich for refueling, but heavy snow had settled on the runway and the conditions were worsening. The plane tried to take off several times, but a technical issue meant the passengers had to disembark. But just a few minutes later, they were told to get back on the plane, and Charlton swapped his seat and decided to sit near the back. On the next takeoff attempt, the plane hit a fence at the end of the runway and then crashed into a house and a tree, splitting in half. 8 Manchester United football players passed away that day, with a total of 23 fatalities on board. Charlton's seat was flung out of the plane, and his teammates thought he was dead, but somehow he survived, unlike many of his teammates, including the legend Duncan Edwards, who Charlton had swapped seats with, meaning the fact that he...
Damn, bruh. This man survived because he only changed his seat after they had to get out and get back on the plane. Whoa. Bro, that is a thinking moment that you're gonna be thinking your whole life. Imagine I didn't change the seat or whatever. Damn, bro. But sad for the other passengers.
He was alive was a miracle in such a tragedy. 2 weeks later, and 2 other Man United players were injured so badly that they were told they would never play football again. But after only a week, Charlton was released from hospital, and despite feeling as slow as an old cart horse, he returned to playing football later that month. After a couple of years of rebuilding himself mentally, he and Manchester United rebuilt from the tragedy and saw huge success where he helped win the World.
Bro, he also had to recover from he has to recover from mentality, because, bro, imagine going through all of the stuff. You gotta die. You saw your teammates die. All the plane crash, and that's a lot, bro. That's a lot.
Cup in 1966 and won the Ballon d'Or that same year. 2 years later, he led.
And even win the Ballon d'Or. God damn. That's amazing.
Manchester United to the European Cup as they became the first English side to lift the trophy just a few years after losing half their team to the crash. Charlton captained the side in the final and scored twice, making this story one of the most remarkable in the history of the entire sport. Okay, now let's lighten the mood, because Jorge Campos is one of the most incredible players on this list, as he became one of the shortest goalkeepers ever, became one of the best in the world, and somehow outscored most strikers in the process. Now, to put this into perspective,
even scoring goals.
Professional goalkeeper is 6'2", so Campos, standing at around 5'6", certainly didn't have the stature of a goalkeeper, and many would believe he's too short for the role. So for his first club, Pumas, he was only the second choice goalkeeper to start with, but instead of sitting on the bench, Campos asked to play as striker, and incredibly, he scored 14 goals as he was among the leading scorers that season. But it wasn't long before his athleticism and agility meant he had a chance to go in goal, and he helped Pumas win the 1990-91 Mexican Championship. By 1993, Campos got a move to the MLS, where despite his tiny size, he was quickly becoming one of the best goalkeepers in the world. And by 1994, Campos would become a legend for Mexico as he was being called up to the World Cup and was one of the stars of the tournament, being ranked as the 3rd best goalkeeper in the entire world. He had become a cheat code for his country, a goalkeeper who could also play striker, and he was getting so good that FIFA actually had to ban this from happening ever again, as by 19.
This is the first time I heard a player playing a striker or a keeper, bro. That's amazing. I never heard that, bro. Shout out to him, though.
1998, they finally implemented a rule that stated goalkeepers were no longer allowed to play as outfield players in the same game. But still, despite losing his goal-scoring edge, Campos finished his career with 34 career goals and a legacy left behind like no other. But as remarkable as this player was, he isn't the most incredible on this list, because that would be the football player who was born a cripple, lost his virginity to a goat, and yet still became one of the greatest football players of all time, with his chants still being sung around stadiums across the world to this day, and his name is Garrincha. In fact, Manuel Francisco dos Santos was born with his right leg 6 centimeters shorter than his left leg, and his spine and feet were twisted, causing the doctor to certify him as a cripple. And if that wasn't enough, he was shorter than most kids his age, so his sister started calling him Little Brown Bird, or Garrincha, a name that would stick and become one of the most legendary names in Brazilian football. But somehow, his upbringing got even crazier, as he grew up poor and wild. He was illiterate, and most of all, he lost his virginity at the age of 12 to a goat. But anyway, Garrincha originally had no interest in becoming a professional player and didn't turn pro until his late teens, when he was already married and had his first of 14 kids. But in his first training session for Botafogo, he took on Brazilian international Milton Santos and dribbled the ball through his legs. And by 1957, he was the second highest scorer in the Rio de Janeiro State League, forcing the national team to include him in the 1958 World Cup team, where just ahead of the tournament in a warm-up game against Italian side Fiorentina, he would score one of his most legendary goals, dribbling past 4 players and the goalie before stopping on the goal line, then dribbling past another defender to score. But rather than being impressed, Brazil's coaches dropped him for the first 2 games as they thought him irresponsible. But he was given a chance in the 3rd game against the USSR and hit the post in the first minute. And in the final against Sweden, Garrincha got 2 assists as Brazil won the World Cup, and he was named in the tournament's best 11. And in that same year, in a match against Argentina's River Plate, he toyed with his opponents so much, sometimes even pretending to forget the ball ball so his opponent would run after him that Garrincha would inspire the first use of the Ole chant, but is now heard in football stadiums around the world. Then, despite offers from Real Madrid, Juventus, and Milan, Garrincha stayed at Botafogo before playing for Corinthians and Flamengo toward the end of his career, but his peak would be for the Brazil national team, who never lost a single game that both Garrincha and Pelé played in. But after 1958, Garrincha took to drinking and put on so much weight that he was dropped by the Brazil national team. He managed to make a return for the 1962 World Cup and was ready to combine with Pelé to take on the world when Pelé got injured and Brazil relied on Garrincha alone. And Garrincha delivered as he scored against England with a curled shot and then got 2 more in the semi-final, but then got a fever before the final, which should have put him out, but that didn't stop him from helping Brazil lift the trophy for a second consecutive time, and Garrincha was named the World Cup's player of the tournament as he was now regarded as one of the greatest players of all time, named alongside Pelé and Diego Maradona as one of the 3 forwards in FIFA's Team of the Century. They might call Garrincha the little brown bird, but we call him the GOAT.
Hey yo, shout out to all the players that was mentioned in this video. I just want to say to everybody who's watching this video, bruh, no matter the circumstances, bro, you gotta keep pushing, find a way, and don't let nobody tell you cannot do something or you're not good enough for it. Bro, believe in yourself and go for it. And shout out to Top Benz for this amazing video. See you guys on the next reaction. Peace.